Princess Ariana of Velora had always been taught that her future was bound by duty. Born into royalty, her every step was calculated, every word carefully spoken. Velora, a planet in the midst of intergalactic turmoil, needed strong alliances, and Ariana's marriage was the key to securing peace between their warring factions. The day of her betrothal to Prince Zorath was approaching, and it was a day that would define the future of the kingdom. Though she had always known the marriage was political, Ariana had never quite understood how much her heart could ache for something more. She often dreamt of a life beyond the gilded cage of the palace, a life filled with adventure and true connection. But she was a princess, and the people of Velora depended on her to uphold the royal traditions, regardless of her personal desires. The kingdom's history was steeped in ancient prophecies, myths that had long been passed down from generation to generation. One such prophecy spoke of a human warrior, destined to claim the heart of the Velorian princess. He would rise from the ashes of war and bring peace to the galaxy. It was a tale often told in hushed whispers, dismissed as mere legend by most of the royal court. After all, how could a human ever play such a pivotal role in the future of a world so distant from Earth? Yet Ariana could not help but wonder. Every so often, she would catch herself gazing at the stars, imagining a life where she wasn't bound by duty or obligation, a life where the prophecy could be true. On the day of the skirmish, Ariana's world shifted in ways she could never have anticipated. Velora's capital was under attack, and the royal guard was called into action. The city's defenses were strong, but there were those who were determined to breach them, hoping to destroy the fragile peace that had been established over the years. Ariana stood at the palace balcony, gazing out at the unfolding chaos below. Her father, King Orcs, had ordered her to remain inside for her safety, but her curiosity and desire to help her people were too strong to ignore. Without thinking, she donned a simple cloak and sneaked past the guards, making her way through the corridors and into the heart of the battle. The sounds of laser fire and clashing weapons filled the air as she reached the outskirts of the city. But what truly caught her attention was the figure standing tall amidst the chaos. A human warrior. He was unlike anything Ariana had ever seen. His armor, worn and scarred from countless battles, gleamed beneath the harsh lights of the sky. His eyes, fierce and determined, locked onto hers across the battlefield. And in that moment, something deep within Ariana stirred. It wasn't just the warrior's strength or his presence that captured her attention. It was a sense of fate, an undeniable pull between them that Ariana could not explain. The battle raged on, but Ariana found herself moving closer to the warrior, drawn as if by an invisible thread. She had no plan, no strategy, just a need to understand why she felt so connected to this stranger in the midst of war. The warrior turned and met her gaze, his lips curling into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. He raised his weapon, cutting down an enemy that had been advancing toward her. Without a word, he motioned for her to follow him, and she did. They fought side by side, the Princess of Velora and the human warrior, their movements synchronized as if they had trained together for years. It was a strange, almost otherworldly experience for Ariana. The warrior's strength and skill were unmatched, and his instincts were flawless. In a matter of moments, they had pushed the enemy back, and the sounds of combat began to fade. When the battle had finally come to an end, Ariana stood beside the human warrior, both of them panting heavily, their armor stained with the marks of war. He lowered his weapon and turned to face her. His expression was one of calm determination, but his eyes betrayed a glimmer of curiosity, as though he too was trying to understand the bond that had formed between them. "I didn't expect to see you out here," he said, his voice deep and steady. Ariana didn't respond immediately. She was still processing the whirlwind of emotions and events that had unfolded in such a short amount of time. "I couldn't just stand by while my people were at risk," she said finally, her voice steady despite the chaos that had unfolded around her. The warrior nodded, his gaze lingering on her. There was something in his eyes, something that made Ariana feel as though she had known him for a lifetime, and yet they were strangers. "I'm Alex," he said after a moment, his tone shifting slightly as though he too was trying to make sense of the strange connection. "I didn't think I'd be saving royalty today." Ariana blinked, taken aback by the casualness of his words. "Royalty?" she echoed, unsure if he was mocking her or if he truly didn't recognize her as the princess. Alex's lips quirked upward slightly, though there was no humor in it. "You're not the first princess I've saved," he said, his voice carrying a hint of weary experience. "Though I must admit, you're the first one I've seen wielding a blade instead of hiding behind a wall of guards." A small, appreciative smile tugged at Ariana's lips. "I've never been one for hiding." Alex studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he gestured toward the now-lowered weapons of the enemy. "I think the battle's over. You should return to the palace." Ariana hesitated, looking back at the distant spires of the palace looming in the distance. Her father, King Orcs, would surely be searching for her by now. But she couldn't bring herself to leave, not yet. Not when she was finally starting to understand something deeper than duty. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. "Why did you come to Velora?" Alex's eyes narrowed slightly, as though the question caught him off guard. "I was sent as part of a mercenary group. I was paid to fight for whoever could afford my services." He paused, the words hanging in the air for a moment. "But sometimes, you end up in places where you don't expect to find something worth fighting for." Ariana's heart skipped a beat. The words felt heavy with meaning, as if Alex had just revealed something far deeper than the surface conversation they were having. And then, for the first time, she allowed herself to entertain the thought, the impossible thought, that the prophecy she had heard so many times as a child might not be just a fairy tale after all. Alex wasn't just a warrior. He was something more. Perhaps, just perhaps, he was the one the prophecy had spoken of all those years ago. But even as she considered this, doubt crept into her mind. Could a human truly be her destiny? How could a warrior from another world be the one to fulfill a prophecy that had been etched into Velora's history for centuries? Before Ariana could voice her thoughts, a sudden, sharp voice rang out from behind her. "Princess." "Where are you?" It was the voice of her trusted guard, Captain Eric. The tension in Ariana's chest tightened, and she turned to face the approaching soldiers who were now rushing toward her. The moment was gone. The warrior, the strange connection, the stirring of something she couldn't explain. All of it was fading, slipping away like a dream. With one last look at Alex, Ariana turned to leave, but not before she gave him a parting glance, one that said everything she could not voice in that moment. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew that her encounter with the human warrior had changed her forever. As she made her way back to the palace, her heart raced with anticipation. The prophecy, once a distant legend, now seemed far too real to ignore. Princess Ariana couldn't stop thinking about the human warrior Alex. After that battle, the connection she had felt toward him only grew stronger. It was more than just his strength and skill in battle. There was something about him, something that made her feel understood, even though they had just met. Her days had been filled with training and courtly duties, but now, after the skirmish, everything felt different. The world outside the palace walls seemed closer, more real, and for the first time she wanted to break free from her royal cage. But duty was a constant companion. King Orcs, her father, had not been pleased with her disappearance during the battle. When she returned to the palace, the walls had felt even colder than usual, the weight of expectations heavier than ever. Her father, the king, had scolded her, though his voice was thick with worry. He had always been protective, but this time it felt like more than concern for her safety. There was something in his eyes, a fear he couldn't hide. "You could have been killed," King Orcs had said when she entered his chambers. His voice was sharp, but his gaze softened when he saw her face. "You are the crown princess. You cannot afford to act recklessly." Ariana had bowed her head. She knew her father meant well, but it wasn't enough. She wasn't just the crown princess. She was a person with dreams and desires of her own. She was more than her duty. "I understand, father," she said, her voice soft, "but I had to help. I couldn't stay behind while my people were fighting." Her father had sighed deeply, rubbing his temples. "You are the future of Velora, Ariana. You must think beyond your own desires." But Ariana wasn't sure she could anymore. Since meeting Alex, her mind had been spinning with questions and possibilities. She couldn't deny the pull she felt when she looked at him. And she couldn't ignore the possibility that the ancient prophecy, the one that had always seemed like a fairy tale, might not be a tale at all. As the days passed, the war raged on. The alien factions, who had been on the brink of peace for years, were now in full conflict. Ariana's betrothal to Prince Zorath was drawing closer, and she was finding it harder and harder to ignore the tug at her heart. She had heard whispers in the halls of the palace, rumors of a mercenary army hired to protect Velora. Alex had been part of that army, and she had seen him fighting at her side. But now he was a stranger once again. Though she had seen him in the heat of battle, she hadn't spoken to him since that day. She couldn't shake the feeling that their paths were meant to cross again, but she didn't know how. The city of Velora was abuzz with preparations for her wedding to Prince Zorath. The royal court was busy planning the event, but Ariana felt like a mere observer in her own life. Everything was set in motion, but she was not sure she wanted to follow it. She wasn't sure she could. Late one evening, Ariana slipped away from the palace once more. She had no specific destination in mind, but she needed to clear her head. The moonlit streets of the city were quieter than usual, as if even the world around her was holding its breath. She walked through the narrow alleys and gardens, the cool night air against her skin. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each one more confusing than the last. As she passed the outer walls of the palace, she paused, hearing a faint sound from behind her. She turned quickly, her heart racing. It was Alex. He stepped out from the shadows, his figure tall and imposing against the backdrop of the darkened city. His eyes locked onto hers immediately, and despite the distance between them, Ariana felt as though he could see straight through her, as if he understood everything she was feeling without a single word. "I thought I might find you here," Alex said, his voice deep and steady, though there was an undercurrent of something else, something like longing. "I've been looking for you." Ariana swallowed, the words stuck in her throat. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She didn't know what she was expecting him to say, but the question had escaped her lips before she could stop it. Alex didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, his eyes scanning her face as though memorizing every detail. He reached out, his hand almost touching hers, but he paused, as if unsure of what to do next. "There's something about you, princess," he said, his voice quieter now. "Something I can't explain." Ariana's heart skipped a beat. She had never been so exposed before, never felt so vulnerable, and yet in Alex's presence it felt like the safest place in the world. "I feel it too," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know why, but I do." For a long moment they stood in silence, the world around them fading away. It was as if time had stopped, and for the first time in her life, Ariana felt like she wasn't just a princess. She was a woman with desires, fears, and hopes that had nothing to do with the crown. "You don't belong here, Alex," she said softly, her gaze fixed on the ground. "You're a human, and I am bound to this world." Alex stepped closer, lifting her chin gently with his hand. "You don't have to be bound, Ariana, you have a choice." She met his gaze, the weight of his words settling over her. She had always known that her future was set. The marriage to Zorath, the political alliances, the responsibilities, it was all part of the plan. But with Alex, everything was different. She was beginning to see the cracks in the life she had been given. "What does that mean?" she whispered, afraid to hear the answer. "It means that you don't have to follow the path everyone else has laid out for you," Alex said, his voice firm but gentle. "You can choose your own destiny." Her heart raced at his words. Could it be possible? Could she really choose a different path? A path that was her own, not dictated by her father's expectations or the prophecy that had always seemed like a fairy tale. But just as she was about to speak, a loud noise echoed through the night, interrupting the moment. Voices approached quickly, and Ariana knew that it was the palace guards. They had been searching for her. Without thinking, she grabbed Alex's arm and pulled him toward the nearby alley where they could hide. They crouched together in the shadows, holding their breath. The guards passed by, their footsteps heavy and determined. Once the danger passed, Ariana exhaled, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "I can't keep doing this," she said, her voice full of emotion. "I can't keep pretending." Alex turned to her, his expression softening. "You don't have to, Ariana, you don't have to pretend with me." She looked into his eyes, and for the first time she felt like she could see a future beyond the walls of the palace. A future where she wasn't bound by tradition or prophecy, but free to choose her own destiny. But there was still so much standing in her way. Her father, the kingdom, and the looming marriage to Prince Zorath. The path ahead was uncertain, and the weight of her choices was heavier than ever. "I don't know what to do," Ariana whispered, her voice full of frustration and fear. "Everything I've known. Everything I've been taught, it's all falling apart." Alex reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "You don't have to have all the answers right now, but know this, you don't have to face it alone." And in that moment, for the first time in her life, Ariana felt as though she might be able to face whatever came next. Not as a princess, but as herself. Princess Ariana woke early the next morning, the weight of her decision pressing down on her chest. The events of the previous night were still fresh in her mind. Alex's words, the way he had made her feel. For the first time in her life, she had felt free, as if the chains of duty and tradition that had held her for so long were no longer important. But now, as the morning sun peeked over the horizon, reality crept back in. She had a duty. She had always known that. Her father, King Orcs, relied on her to uphold the honor and legacy of the Valorian royal family. She had always been the obedient daughter, doing what was expected of her, whether she liked it or not. But last night, with Alex by her side, she had seen a glimpse of something different, a life where she was not just a pawn in a game of politics. But that life was not easy. The marriage to Prince Zorath, the political alliance, her role as crown princess, it was all set in stone. And yet she could not shake the feeling that something had shifted inside her. Alex had opened her eyes to a different world, one where she could be more than just the crown princess. She could be her own person, and perhaps even find love. As Ariana walked through the quiet halls of the palace, her mind raced. She knew she could no longer ignore the feelings that had grown inside her for Alex. But how could she choose him? She was a princess, and he was a human. There was no way her father would ever accept it. And then there was the prophecy, her future was tied to it. Was it really just a myth? Or was she destined for something greater, something beyond the expectations that had always been placed upon her? She reached her father's chambers, where King Orcs was already waiting. His face was as stern as ever, and Ariana could see the concern in his eyes. He had always been a man of duty, but today he seemed almost distant, as if there was something weighing on his mind. "Ariana," King Orcs said as she entered, his voice heavy with authority. "I've heard troubling reports. You've been seen with the mercenary, the human." Ariana tensed, her heart pounding. She had hoped to keep her encounter with Alex a secret, but it seemed her father had already found out. "Yes, father," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "I was in the city. I couldn't stay inside while my people were at risk." Her father's eyes narrowed. "You are the future of Velora, Ariana. You cannot afford to act on impulse. You are betrothed to Prince Zorath. This marriage will unite our people and secure the peace." "I know, father," Ariana said, her voice quieter now. "But what if there's more to my future than just this marriage? What if there's something I'm meant to do, something beyond the prophecy?" King Urix's expression softened, but only for a moment. "The prophecy is nothing more than a legend, Ariana. The future of this kingdom depends on your choices, not on some myth. Your duty is to Velora. The people expect you to fulfill your role as crown princess." Ariana clenched her fists, her frustration building. "I don't want to be a pawn in this game anymore, father," she said, her voice shaking. "I want to choose my own path. I want to choose my own future." Her father's gaze hardened. "Your future is not yours to choose. You are bound by your duty to this kingdom. Do not forget that." Ariana's chest tightened. She had always known that her father would never understand. He was too tied to the traditions and politics of the kingdom to see her as anything other than a tool to be used. But for the first time, Ariana wasn't sure she could keep living like this. The more she thought about Alex, the more she realized that there was a part of her that longed for freedom, for the ability to choose her own path. But how could she break free from everything she had been taught? As the days passed, Ariana found herself torn between two worlds, the life she had always known and the life she imagined with Alex. She knew her father would never accept Alex, and she knew that choosing him would mean giving up everything she had been taught to value. But every time she thought about Zorath, about the political marriage that was waiting for her, something inside her recoiled. It wasn't right. She couldn't pretend anymore. One evening, after another tense conversation with her father, Ariana slipped away from the palace once more. She had made up her mind. She had to see Alex again to understand what they were, what they could be. She needed to know if there was a future for them, or if she was just chasing a dream. She found him in the city, in the same place where they had met before. The streets were quieter now, the only sounds the distant hum of the city and the soft rustle of the wind. When Alex saw her, he smiled, but there was something in his eyes, a question, a hesitation. "I knew you'd come," he said, his voice warm but tinged with uncertainty. "But I didn't know if you'd want to see me again." "I had to," Ariana replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what I'm doing anymore, Alex. My whole life has been planned for me, but when I'm with you, it feels like I'm free. I don't want to marry Zorath. I don't want to be a princess anymore. I just want to be me. Alex stepped forward, his hand gently cupping her cheek. Then be yourself, he said softly. I don't know what the future holds for us, but I know I want to be with you, and I'll stand by you no matter what. Tears welled up in Ariana's eyes as she looked at him. For the first time, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She had always known there was more to life than the royal duties she had been raised with, but she had never dared to dream that she could have it all. Alex was the answer to the questions she had never even known how to ask. I don't know how to make this work, Ariana said, her voice trembling. I don't know how to make my father understand, how to break free from everything I've been taught. Alex's expression softened, and he pulled her into a gentle embrace. You don't have to have all the answers right now, he said, but I'm here, and I'll help you figure it out. For the first time in her life, Ariana felt as though she was standing on the edge of something new, something unknown but full of possibility. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that with Alex by her side, she could face anything. But the road ahead was far from easy. There would be challenges, both from her father and from the kingdom. Velora would not easily accept a human as its future ruler, and the prophecy that had always been a part of her life could not be ignored forever. But as Ariana stood there in the arms of the man she had come to care for, she realized one thing: the future was hers to choose. She would not let anyone, not even her father, decide her destiny for her. And no matter what came next, she would face it with Alex by her side.